Breaking news, special counsel Jack Smith is asking the Supreme Court to decide whether Donald Trump has immunity from criminal prosecution for alleged crimes he committed while in office. CNN's Paula Reed and Joan Biskupic join me now. Paula, explain what Jack Smith asked of the Supreme Court exactly.
This is huge. This is the first time the special counsel is going right to the Supreme Court, and he is asking them to decide the question of whether former President Trump is immune from criminal prosecution. Now, this is a question that Trump has been litigating. He lost at the district court level. He said he intended to appeal, but usually an appeal would at least first go to the Court of Appeals, and then, depending on what happens there, possibly go to the Supreme Court. But the special counsel here is saying, no, just you guys take this up now. Because, yes, this is an interesting constitutional question, but the special counsel is mindful of the calendar. This is all about timing. So here the special counsel is saying, look, we need you to decide this now so that this case can go on as planned in March. In fact, they're also saying that, look, even if you don't want to take this question up, if you don't want to skip the Court of Appeals, can you at least tell the Court of Appeals to do this quickly? Because, Dana, if a question like this goes through the normal channels, it can take months, possibly well over a year to decide this, which could push that trial until after the election.
Joan, how likely is it, based on your experience in covering the court, that they will say yes to short-circuiting the process?
Well, what Jack Smith has done with his team is to point up a very important precedent, taking us all back to the summer of 1974 and the Watergate era and the tapes case. And what Jack Smith is saying here is that this court was able to handle that kind of urgent question back in 1974, heard arguments. I think they got the petition in the summer, June, July. They heard arguments roughly July 9th, if I'm remembering right, and they issued an opinion on July 24th. This was all in a matter of days, and we know what the consequence there was. The court said unanimously that Richard Nixon did not have absolute privilege to withhold those tapes. This kind of question is exactly of that magnitude now. And what they're saying is, today is what, the 11th? They're saying if get the response from the other side, from the Trump team, by December 18th, and we will waive a longer response period ourselves to get this all on the calendar as soon as possible. And the justices actually could do it. They have space in their calendar to do this. It's not, we don't have the kind of term we had 2 years ago. They don't have yet a big abortion case pending. They could pick one up this Wednesday, actually, the abortion medication case. But what Jack Smith has tried to do here is say, whatever else you have, this is so important. It involves obviously things stemming from January 6th, the imminence of the trial coming, and the need for the Supreme Court to step in and resolve this immunity question is so important.
Yeah, what you just said is well, all of what you both said is very important, but the precedent, the fact that Jack Smith is pointing to Watergate.
Yeah.
And not only is that critical for president, it also reminds all of us how, to use your word, huge this is and would be when it comes to the ability or inability to prosecute a former president and whether or not he would be immune.
What do you think, Elliot?
No, look, they can do it, and the Supreme Court can grant this. And as Paul had said, they have the clock on their minds here. And look, everybody knew that this was eventually going to make it to the Supreme Court in one way or another. Now, the normal course of action would be to go to the appeals court. That could take months and months, and they'd ultimately draft a decision there, and then which would be appealed to the Supreme Court. Parties are allowed to go straight to the Supreme Court. This is an important constitutional question. It's never been resolved, and that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It is just a complex question. It has to go to the Supreme Court. Who knows what they're going to do with it? They may, as Paul said, they may kick it back down to the appeals court and either say expedite it or simply just answer first this question of immunity. There's other claims that Trump's team is raising, but the immunity one, is he immune from prosecution, is really the big one that has to be resolved pretty soon.
The reality is these are majority conservative justices, several appointed by Trump. I mean, the reality is they could say, yeah, he has immunity. You can't move forward with this case.
They could, but even before you get there, the very question of whether the Supreme Court takes this kind of case on is itself an open question. The court has been, since 2019, far more frequently granting these emergency requests to go straight to them. Now, that may be a function of the justices who are on the court, or something's changed in their heads. We don't know because we're never in that room. But they've been doing it more frequently. They might do it now, and we just have to wait and see pretty quickly how they're going to resolve it.
Yeah, and just reading through the filing that just came in this afternoon, the special counsel is arguing nothing could be more vital to our democracy than that a president who abuses the electoral system to remain in office is held accountable for criminal conduct. I know this is just coming out, Kristen, but are you hearing anything from the Trump camp?
They haven't responded yet, but I do think that we should pay attention to, as Elliot said, looking at the timeline. And that's really what it is about for the Trump people as well. When I talk to them about when this trial is going to happen, they do believe that the March trial is going to happen before the election, that of course being the special counsel's investigation into his overturning or attempting to overturn the 2020 election. But they do still think there is some wiggle room because of the fact that this was going to the appeals court, because of the fact that they believe that they can delay it. I mean, they are going to try and do every single thing they possibly can to push this past the election, because they think that Donald Trump can win the election and he's not sitting in trial every single day. So that is very interesting in this to me, the fact that they have clearly kind of called them on their game and said, okay, you're waiting here, you push this to the appeals court, now we're just going to get it over with. So that takes one element out. One of the things that actually Trump and his team were relying on, having this be a lengthy process.
And there's a little bit of gamesmanship there, because the Trump team could have appealed to a 3-judge panel of the Court of Appeals. If they didn't get a decision they liked there, they could have then appealed it to the full Court of Appeals. And then if they didn't like the decision there, they could have then taken it to the Supreme Court. Even under the best of circumstances for the Trump team, that could have taken months. And I think, like you said, it's calling the bluff.
Yeah.
Now, again, the Supreme Court doesn't have to agree to it, as we know, but this was a very aggressive step by the prosecutors to move this case along.
It's huge, because really the Trump legal strategy boils down to delay, delay, delay. And there was a hope that this constitutional question, which has never been decided before, would take a little while to get through the appellate process, possibly even go en banc, then go to the Supreme Court. And they hope that it could at least delay this trial, which has a ripple effect on other criminal trials, until after the election. So it's clear the special counsel is like, nope, we're going to try this option. This is aggressive. This is the first time they've gone to the Supreme Court. Now the question is whether the Supreme Court wants to do this, if they want to completely reject the request or meet them halfway and maybe just say to the appellate court, look, we all know time is of the essence here. There is a public interest. Let's move it along. Let's not sit on this one for a year.
How long, so just timeline-wise, when can we expect to hear from the Supreme Court?
I mean, it's the Supreme Court. They kind of do what they do when they want to do it. So I would expect that they too are probably mindful of the timeline here. So I would expect we'll hear from this soon, but they don't have a deadline.
Yeah. And it's just a reminder, right, of the collision between these legal cases and the fact that Trump is running for president, and we're in the lead up to the Iowa caucuses, right? And just today, he was going to testify and then pulled out last minute in New York.
Pulls out last minute, doesn't show up, looks like, okay, this case is wrapping up, but that doesn't mean his legal problems are wrapping up. They're really just ramping up. And that's happening at the same time that his campaign is ramping up. When you look at the schedule for January with both the Iowa caucuses as well as New Hampshire primary, and he's going to be on the road a lot more. He has to be in many of these states. We know that he is looking at New Hampshire. He sees the field there. They are not feeling as confident as they feel in Iowa. So he has to be traveling. Well, when they're trying to plan, it's actually been very difficult, according to the people around him, because they can't plan that far in ahead. Even if they think that they know the dates of the hearing in March that's going to be here in D.C., they don't think they're set in stone because of these various legal maneuverings that his lawyers are doing to try and get those dates delayed.
And, I think a lot of folks don't realize that these are two completely different government systems that exist independently of each other. And yes, we have these elections every 4 years, but it's not, many judges regard it as not their responsibility to time their proceedings to accommodate other things in government like elections and so on. And they take a long time to get to trial sometimes.
And we've seen that argument. We've seen that argument that judges shouldn't have to worry about the election, but that's exactly what Donald Trump wants to do. He wants to tie the politics to the legal, to say, look, they're taking this up because they want to rule against me. And he's going to use that politically.
And you guys just had that graphic up with just the month of January and how busy it is with different campaign events. The idea of adding potentially oral arguments at the Supreme Court, even in the middle of January, on this central issue that would really decide whether he goes to trial before or after the election. again, a massive development.
It absolutely
We'll see what they
is.
do.
Thank you for helping us better understand what this means. Thank you. Paula Reed, Kristen Holmes, Elliot Williams.